In terms of emerging international collaborations in the field of Hodgkin lymphoma, I'm really happy to talk about our HoLISTIC consortium. HoLISTIC stands for Hodgkin Lymphoma International Study for Individual Care, HoLISTIC. The website is www.hodgkinconsortium.com or .org. There's no S on the Hodgkin, so all one word, hodgkinconsortium.com. So this is something that launched, like many projects, in a dark conference room 7 years ago when I was at Tufts Medical Center in Boston with a key collaborator and close colleague of mine, Dr. Susan Parsons, who is AYA expert, pediatric oncologist, and a health outcomes expert. And we really had the thought initially, and others have as well, there's really a joint consensus and yearning to combine all of the great amounts of data that we have. And when I say great amounts of data, meaning clinical trial data, phase 3 clinical trial data, and large phase 2 data, as well as Hodgkin registries and cohorts. Because a challenge we have with the decision-making in Hodgkin lymphoma is, how do we assess that individual patient in front of us, their individual patient characteristics, the disease status, across different alternative Hodgkin treatment options? There often is not one right treatment. There's different options. And the challenge, especially in younger patients, is we have not just that initial efficacy of cure. What about the late effects? Sometimes we'll frame it as post-acute effects, 1 to 10 years after treatment, and late effects, more than 10, 20, 30 years. And obviously, there's not ideal information to study this, especially late morbidity and maybe mortality, across the lifelong time horizon from one single source of data. So that's really how it started, and we garnered just outstanding collaboration across colleagues from around the world, in Europe, in Canada, Australia, et cetera, to try to knit together and bridge all these gaps of data that we have, of take the great granularity of clinical trial data. Although what's a gap with clinical trial data is they're typically not followed for years and certainly not decades for late effects. And knit that together with the registry data that typically follows patients not just for years, but for decades of data, more extended follow-up and detailed data of morbidities, whether heart disease, second cancers, quality of life, et cetera. And it was a lot of work. It took several years during the pandemic to coordinate these data use agreements, material transfer, because we're talking about individual patient data, not just a meta-analysis, into a large, massive database with a common data dictionary, et cetera. So a lot of work was done and put it all together. 18 clinical trials, most major phase 3 randomized studies across the world in North America, Europe, et cetera, are included, as well as 5 large registries as well, and community oncology practice of data with validation cohorts, collaborating with the German Hodgkin Study Group, the Dutch, and St. Jude, as well as patient advocates, Lymphoma Research Foundation, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, Lymphoma Coalition. Altogether, it's 80 members, adult pediatric oncologists, radiation oncologists, imaging experts, biology experts, survivorship experts, and of course, decision-making scientists, statisticians, epidemiologists. And it really lent itself to forming this consortium. And that's great. And we have this data. Of course, we need funding to perpetuate it. We were fortunate to a lot of hard work and persistence to obtain a recent $3.5 million grant from the National Cancer Institute to help spur this consortium together. And in the current state, we have harmonized together north of 10,000 individual patient records with detailed information into one master big data database. And we're starting to analyze this. And what do we intend to do with it? Well, we intend to do a few different things. One, we'd like to have contemporary prognostication. So we're starting with a newly diagnosed advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma and doing detailed predictive modeling. We'll have a oral presentation at ASH that represents that, and we think will be a modern Hodgkin Lymphoma International Prognostic Index. We'll do the same for early stage disease to follow, but we don't want to just stop there. We want to continue because that's a start. But then how do we factor in different treatment options? factor in response adapted imaging. So we intend to do that through multi-state modeling. And then also, how do we simulate those post-acute or late effects that occur 5, 10, 25 years later? So through simulation modeling, we'll be able to do that, and really to kind of bring it all together to ultimately help providers and patients with understanding objective data regards to their diagnosis, their outcomes, their late effects, whether it's a cure or, again, as noted, cardiovascular, cancer, et cetera. And finally, I'll just mention, we'll even hopefully be able to layer in aspects such as biology, imaging, quality of life, cost of care, as well as patient preferences, which we all know is very important. So a lot of excitement that will present at this meeting, at ASH, and many more meetings hopefully to come.